David Jensen. I am the technical director for University Theater, and this is our student choice for our How to Theater series. And we got a bunch of requests for how to build on a budget. So today we have with us Jayme.
Hi, I am Jayme Mellema. I'm the scenic designer for University Theater and painter and prop person.
I'm Michael White. I'm the assistant technical director for productions at University Theater.
I'm going to be doing a lot of sharing of a slideshow. We're going to have lots of pictures today. So it'll be a little different than our hands-on that we've been doing for these how-tos, where we'll just be showing lots of pictures, lots of slides. And I'm actually looking forward to this how-to because we're finally not wearing masks for this one. Anything else, Jayme, top of the show? Anything?
No, let's start with the first thing.
All right, so Jayme, you love to talk about this because this is a good design thing, and my wife, who's a graphic designer, marketer, she talks about this too all the time. So
yeah, so I mean, you only get to have two, right? So this is the cheap, good, and fast triangle, pyramid, Venn diagram, however you want to call it. And if you haven't seen this before, should be your new mantra. But so you only get two of these three, and you can see how they overlap. So you can have it good and fast, but it's not going to be cheap. You can have it good and cheap, but it will not be fast. And you can have it fast and cheap, but it will probably not be very good. So trying to balance all those out is always a challenge. And for every show, it's going to be a little bit uniquely different, right? But we're always shooting for good and cheap, so we know that doesn't always go quickly. So we try to, I guess one of the first things we try to do in our scheduling even is just making sure we have time to do the things we need to do. And I know there's never enough time, right? But part of how I do that as a designer is I make sure I'm designing things as far in advance as I can. And I keep pushing that further and further out to give us more and more room to sort of make choices on the front end instead of on the back end about how we're going to do stuff and how we can do that efficiently and cheaply and all that jazz. So sometimes there is wiggle room in your schedules to kind of find more time to make things a little cheaper. If you're working somewhere where you have outside designers, you might want to talk to the folks who hire them about getting them in a little sooner and that sort of thing. If you can get that information sooner, you might have more time. Or if they can get it to you quicker, that means you can have longer time to communicate with them about it. But yeah, that's the bulk of it. You guys have anything you want to add to that?
I worked for a design company down in Atlanta, and this was their on their coffee mugs. So I mean, it's exactly when you come to someone with a project, they're going to say, pick two of these, and it seriously is, it's one of the big things. So something that we've talked about, as far as trying to get into this unattainable area is what we agree on is having stock.
Just
having stock and more stock, and just if you don't have stock, building your stock. And just every show try to build even more stock.
This is one of the unique things that we have, in the situation of me as a resident designer, that I'm able to I know what we do and don't have and what we can really use if we don't have it. So I try to find places to design into the process, oh, hey, we don't have a turntable. Let's do a show where most of our budget is going to this turntable, so now we'll have it forever, or whatever the piece might be, right? That's not always going to be the case for everybody. But, a lot of theaters have designers who come back frequently, and they might have those kinds of things. And so having conversation, they might have that understanding of your stock and what you have available. So having that conversation with your regulars who are designing and working with you a lot about the things that, you might need in the future, or the things that could be really useful for not just their show. If they have that in their ear and their mind, then maybe they'll come up with something that might use that and build that into their, you never know, you might get something out of it that you can hang on to for a while.
exactly. So this first picture is just some of our stock platforms that we have just kind of sitting in between our two theaters. That our two main theaters are Titmus Theater and Studio Theater. So wherever we can kind of fit storage in, we've got some storage. And platforms are some of the heaviest things that we have. So we keep them close so we don't have to move them too far. But there's a lot of things going on in this picture. We've just got, you can see two stacks of mainly 4x8 platforms. We do have some 4x4s in there, some 4x6s, more 4x6s, 4x5s, 4x4s, 2x4s, 1x's, two of various sizes. We've got some little baby triangles up there, little 2-foot by 2-foot triangles. We've got some 2-step units. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them kind of nested together. And then also sitting up on top here are some of our stud walls. And we use those for our platforms when we're legging things up to, our platforms up to 2 foot high. So anything below that, we'll usually just use legs, but once we get above 2 foot and above, we'll do more of a stud wall construction.
We have some images of that later too, if you want.
Yeah, we've got pictures of all these platforms in here.
Storage is always a concern, obviously. There are other kinds of platforms out there that take up less room, and there are some that take up even more room. This is sort of our happy medium. I know that some people, to avoid using legs for short platforms, will even, Dave, you mentioned this the other day, use 6-inch high platforms instead of our, whatever it is, 5-inch or 4.5. Yeah, but there are like versions of platforms that are thinner even. I know that some people really love them. We've never really bought into that, but you can find them out there if storage is a big concern and you need more space. There are potentially other options.
We'll see some of those platforms later. So I love to talk about this show because it was very funny to me. So this was one of the first years, I think, wasn't it? That Jayme,
yeah, so our building had reopened. Our program had been smaller. We had a big major renovation, so we had lost a lot of our students because our building was closed. And I was brand new. Like a lot of the staff was brand new. So this was the first show of the second year, and this was me like after a really difficult first year, realizing like, let's keep it simple.
So one of the big difficulties of that first year moving back into the building was that we lost all of our stock flats.
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of stock.
We didn't have a single stock flat. We did have stock platforms though. And so Jayme made a model using every single stock platform that we had.
Yeah, I just cut out the sizes and I was like, okay, what can I make with this?
And so you stacked all the platforms that we had in stock on top of each other to make this. And one of the other things that we had in stock was a very old discarded cyc that was from Stewart Theater, so it was very large.
Yeah, it was very large. It was dry rotted, so we really couldn't use it anymore. It was sort of like discolored as well. So we were like, what are we gonna do with this thing? You know, you never want to toss something so large away.
So another thing to talk about on this show too, something that we do quite a bit are these 4-foot by 4-foot tiles that we use. And that is because this show is over in Stewart Theater, our loading period is often pretty short. So it's nice to be able to have a tiled floor that's already been pre-painted before we get over into the space. So once we get over there, we can just lay the floor down rather than painting the floor in space.
It's a large arena space where basically you're looking right at the floor. And so not having any time to paint in that space very much is a challenge for every time we do a show over there. And so a lot of my solutions about that have been like, how can we paint it before bringing it over without requiring a huge paint deck either, because we don't have paint space in our shops either. So tiles were great, right? So if you don't have a big shop space, if you don't have a big theater space, like a floor to work on, and you like, the tiles work great, and you can sort of mix and match them, and they've been handy for years and years.
When they get old, they finally get recycled, but we do reuse them over and over. So here's the top view of the same model, and this is just the bottom layer of the platforms that Jayme was stacking. We also had these cubes that were already in stock too, from previous shows. About theaters love cubes; they always come in handy. And then this is a bottom view of that, because Jayme then had to dismantle his model in order to make the ground plan.
Right, and glue it all together and all that stuff. But yeah, because I had to outline each level very carefully so it was exact. So yeah, I had to keep it all together, which looks ridiculous in this photo.
So this was then a production shot.
So we used that old cyc because we knew we would never use it again otherwise. And we draped it across the floor and it up into the space and used it as a projection surface, and knowing that it would not survive this show.
Oh, it was really bad. It was definitely time for it to go. And then here you can see the tiles a little bit better in this shot. So that was just a really time-intensive process for that paint treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nice to be able to do that outside of the space.
Yes, marble takes forever, and not doing it in Stewart was great.
So next picture is Bright Star that we did just last summer. And what I like to show on this picture is that all of these platforms back here, so there's a step and platform, this was all stock except for 2 pieces right here. So that little custom piece right there, and that little custom piece right there. So there's that cute little 2x2 triangle platform right there that you saw in the picture. And then these are all just stock 4x8s, 4x4s, 4x4 triangles, 2x8s, and whatnot. So yeah, it's just where do you want to spend your money? Here, the base was just everything was stock.
Yeah, it saves for this particular, this show was showing in conjunction with another one, and they are running together in the summer, and we have a pool of money for both those shows, and this is the show where I ended up putting most of the money, and we'll show you the other show in a little bit when we get to talking about flats, but saving that cash by spreading it out. And
then Mike built all these 2x4 flats, or not quite flats, but they're walls that we put together with screws, so then we can take it apart and recycle all that 2x4 again.
Yeah, we use nice big runs of lumber for that, so it would be really useful to reuse in other things.
I think that's a stock flat right there.
Yeah, there were two that were put together to make the posts.
Pulled out this picture because this is a good example of being able to do funky platforms, such as round platforms, but again, by using stock. So next picture, you can see that this is the platform layout for that show, for Cabaret. All of these platforms are stock up until these tiny pieces that are then the custom pieces. So this is the lower level. So this is all stock, and then just a couple of these small pieces. So it's a little too small to read, but right here it says cut 2 of each of these. So all of these platforms were created just with 8 sheets of plywood.
Because ply is going to be your expense. 2x4 is pretty cheap. Plywood, expensive.
This shot was when it was in Titmus Theater for rehearsals. So it doesn't all fit in here quite yet, but this was just to show our students how to put the show back together once we loaded it in. But this is a good shot of all of that stock platforms with just the custom pieces out here. And look at that, there's a 2-step unit right there, boom.
Yeah.
They get used all the time. And then below the platforms are, again, those stud walls that we like to reuse over and over again. So screw them down to the floor, lay a platform on top. 2 platforms will share a stud wall. So it's a quick way to help speed up the process and increases the layout, accuracy.
Yeah. I mean, you can do it with legs, which is probably technically cheaper because it's less lumber, but they move a bit more, and they tend to squeak a bit more. But
I'm gonna share screen again.
okay. Oh, right, the video.
So this is Cabaret. As going in for loading.
You can see it all get put in there, and
so there's definitely some funky corners and everything. So the big stuff in the center that laid out right away, but then as soon as you get that kind of stuff laid out, then platforms start moving in pretty quickly.
yeah, that's the nice thing about the stud walls, is that they just, once you get everything laid out, it goes in really quick. I mean, this makes obvious, like, volunteers are a big part of how we save money. So having a good volunteer base and building up your volunteer base, these happen to all be students, but in a community theater situation, having a really strong volunteer base is going to really be your friend.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're very lucky to have a lot of students that are interested and volunteer a lot of their time. So
in this case too, the cast, which is a large cast, is sort of required to be there as well, and that helps a lot.
So you'll see some of these flats coming in, and we'll talk about some of these flats too. So you can see back in the back, some of these are stock flats, and they've got other flats on top of it. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need to watch all of this.
Yeah, that's what
I don't know if we have much more, actually.
I think I'll stop it right there. It's dinner break.
More of the walls go up. That's about it.
Stop that.
Yeah. We'll go back to the other one.
Yep. Okay, so
soft goods are another thing that you can build into your stock.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, there's the traditional blacks and things like that. But if you have other sort of unique fabrics, you can potentially reuse them as well. Like here, basically all of my money for this show went into that staircase. The fireplace area was built entirely out of stock, and the platforms were all stock. I'm actually reusing the platforms from Cabaret in a different layout configuration.
So yeah, so just on top of that, so Cabaret was the show that was right before this.
Right.
So again, we don't have a lot of storage to be able to keep all these round types of platforms, but yeah, Jayme does like to try to use from one show to the next, or maybe 2 shows, or maybe 3 shows. Let's just kind of hide that in the corner if we can, until that show comes around, and try to reuse it. So yeah, this was, again, that same Cabaret platform, now just rearranged.
Yeah, except in this case, like both the round sections are on the same level instead of 2 different levels.
Exactly. And we've got another drawing that kind of shows it. But yeah, so that was the big money.
Yeah, creating curved things is expensive. That's just a general rule. Things with curves cost money.
Exactly, and they take time.
They take time because they're complicated.
Just something to point out too on these stairs. So we've got lots of stairs in storage. So I think these were 2 of our 6-foot long staircases sitting on top of platforms to get another step. So that was stock stairs that we keep in stock too.
Yeah, we'll stock platforms and stairs together to sort of get what we need. So that's super handy. You can see that layout there again.
Yeah, so these are all the same platforms from Cabaret. just rearranged with different stock flats.
So I don't know if we're going to talk about this later. We probably are. I know we are. It's on our list, but I feel like I should bring it up now. But like, so we keep an inventory of all these things, and that's like, as the designer, that's super handy for me to be able to reference. So one way community theaters or high schools or other places could, like with your designers, having something that's current and up to date, some kind of digital inventory. I mean, it doesn't have to be pictures, but a list that you keep accurate and up to date that you can share with your designers will be a really amazing tool for them to be able to reuse those things that you have. Like if you've got these curved platforms in stock, like throw them on that list and say, hey, this next show, these next 2 shows, this will be available. Even having some of those more unusual things on there could be handy, especially if your designer is new.
Yeah, and Mike and I tried to update. Mike just updated the list not too long ago. We tried to after every show, because a lot of shows you'll build maybe another 1 or 2 stock flats or platforms, or you'll lose 1 or 2 depending on the show. They'll just be worn out, and it will be just time to retire it.
Yeah, they'll only last so long.
But this picture is because of the silks here.
Yeah, it's like a weird shimmer organza.
I'll go back to just to see. You can see it a little bit here.
Yeah, it's harder to see in that.
You see some of the gold in this.
Yeah, it's like blue and gold. It's really cool. So I originally bought this for Arabian Nights, this fabric. So you can hear it seems really gold, which is great. Depending on how you light it, it changes color. So that makes it more flexible too, which is cool. But so this was like 11 years ago. No, 10. Long enough ago, but we hung on to all that fabric. All my money went to this fabric, right? The platforms were stock, and then we had some flats that we built that were not stock, but all of my money is in that fabric. So yeah, it's there to be reused, and we finally reused it just last year.
That stuff does not take up much space at all.
No, oh my gosh. It's because it's so light and airy. It's like a box.
Exactly.
A very modest box.
And label your
takes up very little space, which is the nice thing about silk.
And again, keep that in your inventory and label your boxes so people know what you have.
We created the draping in the background there. Yeah, that's just our regular black scrim. So I wanted to, I wanted more fabric, right? More fabric. And so to help give some of that fabric and to make it feel airy like that, like the other fabric, we used the scrim, kind of just sort of draping it loosely on the floor instead of having a pipe. And
to point out too, we'll see this in some other pictures. I just thought about this. Here is our crystal stars.
Yeah.
So we have crystals that we hang on thread.
Yeah.
And then you light it from the side, cut that shutters really tight, and they just kind of twinkle because they're just going to naturally spin a little bit. And the air conditioner is going to move them a little bit. So it's a twinkle effect. I think, a lot of people, there are star drops and there's, that LED kinds of things, but I find this old school version to be the most effective and beautiful looking, honestly. It's because it's a lot more subtle and it stores much smaller than a giant like LED drop or something expensive and huge will. Exactly. Because they're again more time consuming to put up in the air. But if you're going to use it in advance, that's something that could be put up, at the very beginning of your build while you're waiting on drawings for this or that or whatever it is. Don't bump them up, otherwise they get all tangled. Yeah, that is the sad part about those. So this picture is again another picture with another round platform, but again it's made out of tons of stock platforms. Yep. With again 8 sheets of plywood to make all these pieces to make that massive round platform. We get into flats. So this is in our shop. So this is some of our flat storage, and our stock is going to vary for different people. Stock to us is going to be different from stock to other people. But so we have 4 foot by, this one's a 6 foot. We have some 8 foots. We have some 12 foots. we're really low on 12 foots right now. We lost a bunch. We've got 10 foots, 12 foots, and then more 10 foots, and then 2-foot stuff back here, and then 3-foot stuff and 1-foot stuff. And then we've got 2 of these door flats that we kind of keep in storage. And barely squeaking into the picture is this is a top of a door. So sometimes if we'll just kind of put 2 4x8s together side by side, that's our spacer for a door flat. So, and there's other various smaller flats that we have too. If I want to make a 4x8 into a 4x10, we've got 2x4s to screw onto the top to make it a little bit bigger. But so we do Hollywood style, and we do have some, every now and then we'll have theatrical style kind of roll through. But
Theatrical style will definitely take up less space if storage is an issue for you, but they will be wobblier looking on stage, unless you have some 1x flats, because we also use, and we'll show you some more pictures of that later, but we also use flats as jacks a lot too.
Absolutely.
So you could use some Hollywood flats for jacks with your theatrical flats.
So this is that same show that Jayme was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
That was happening at the same time as Bright Star. So these are all just Go Back for Murder. So these were all, I think they were all pretty much stock. Mike, did we have to build any?
I had to build, I think, that 4x4.
There was a couple tiny ones.
There were a couple small ones that I had to build custom because we just didn't have them in stock in standard sizes.
Right.
But everything else is all standard size stock.
So you can kind of see how they're kind of layered on top of each other here.
Yeah, the only thing we spent money on for that show was all the rope. And that even wasn't that much.
I mean, even for building the flats that I had to build, I still used from other stock 1x that we had, excess 1x and excess Luan. So that didn't even cost any money from the show.
Right.
Yeah.
So these were.
We should at some point talk about the budgets that we are typically working with, just so folks have a sense of.
Sure. I mean, I think this show came in under $500, and that's including props, scenery, and paints.
Yeah, this was a really cheap show. But again, I wanted all my money to go to Bright Star because I knew it was gonna. I mean, it's a musical, so it was gonna eat up more cash.
Right. So this house.
Yeah, the dollhouse is something we had from the Secret Garden from several years ago.
So that's just kind of hanging out in the shop.
Yep, I wouldn't let you throw it away because I knew I would reuse it. Sometimes we have to argue about what we should keep and not keep. And that's fair.
Absolutely. I mean, storage is an issue for everyone.
Yeah, totally.
But Mike made it a nice home where it's been up out of the way. As soon as we made a nice home where it was, because it was floating around backstage forever.
Yep.
As soon as we got a nice home for it to be out of the way, then Jayme was like, "Hey, let's use it." So came back down.
As always.
So this is another example of using stock flats. So all of these flats are all, this is our town. All these flats are 4 foot by 16 foot. And 2 of these panels are doors, actually. I kind of barely see that one. But they are 4x8s. So we've got 4x8s above them. And these are made up of, let's say, 4x10 with a 4x6 sitting on top, or 4x12 with a 4x4 sitting on top. So again, all these flats were pretty much stock.
And even, can you go back 2 photos to our town? Even, I mean, we built the moon for the show, but it's even in our stock now.
Right.
So it'll get reused sometime eventually.
That's the hope. We built it so that it would fold in half so we could store it.
And again, we built that theatrical style, so it didn't take up much room at all. So it's an inch thick.
So even with certain things that we build for shows, we keep in mind of if we can use it for stock, we build it to last and to be able to be reused.
Yeah, because this is not, even though this is theatrical style, it's not soft covered, it's hard covered, which makes it sturdy and will last longer. Part of that had to do with just being able to paint it. You need to kind of walk on it. But But part of that is also just so that it will last.
So this was the Colored Museum. Another good example. So here's the two door flats that you saw in that stock picture. Sitting beside it are some more stock, and sitting above it is some more stock. These flats right here, it's a 4x10, 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 and then a custom to be able to sit on top of a 4x8 and 4x8 platform. And you can kind of see it a little bit easier here. So it's just an 8x8 platform, again, made up just of 4x8 platforms, and then the flats up above, we were thinking about using 4x8 flats, but then we decided let's just make it easier on ourselves and just made them theatrical. So those were actually muslin covered to be lighter. And those are actually sitting over in the Stewart Theater because they were going to be reused for a show in this past August that had to get canceled. But, so you can see the stock platforms here, and this is a good example of using our extra flats as jacks for these walls. This was In the Blood. This was, again, under $500 for paint, scenery, and props. And this was a very quick build too. This was kind of in between some of our bigger shows. And you can see in the drawing, it's 4x10 with a 4x8 sitting on top, 2x10, 2x8, 2x10 flats, covered in front by a 3x10 flat, and then 2x13 flats sitting on top. So to make all that, all we had to build were these little cap pieces up here. And the bottoms were 4x5 platforms. And the brick we reuse over and over. Got quite a bit of brick. And even this piece down here at the bottom, that was a 2x10 flat that was just kind of sitting in front of it to make that bottom.
Bright Star.
Back to Bright Star. So another use of flats. So we've got these mountains that were about 9 feet tall back here, taking up quite a bit of space. And there's 3 rows of them. And what we did was we used flats to build that up, to get some of the height, to take up some of that space. So 4x12.
Didn't we also use stud walls? Didn't we also use some stud walls to get them up higher? Or am I just misremembering that?
No, they were all flats.
Yeah. Never mind.
You can see got a lot of chunks out of just a couple sheets of Luan. Some of this is from ground row 2. So that one's ground row 2, that one's ground row 2. But very simple framing, just to make sure that it stays upright. But yeah, so. And then this was Men on Boats. This was another one where we used a lot of stock to fill in a lot of the space. So we used the stock flats as our support for the very cheap OSB that we then cut to the profile and then attached to the flats. So we used the flats as our framing.
Yeah, so the OSB is like really cheap plywood essentially. So you're not paying for the good stuff. We weren't going to be seeing it, so because we were covering it all in fabric. So we just needed something thick enough and sturdy enough because Luan wouldn't quite be rigid enough. So we didn't care how it looked or how good it was. So we used the cheap stuff in that case. In this case, yeah, all my money went to all that fabric, which was China silk, which China silk is reasonably inexpensive, although these days, because of the tariffs in China, has gone up in price. But in this case, we hand dyed all this fabric, which looked great. It wasn't actually that time consuming, honestly.
A couple weeks.
Yeah, it was a couple weeks worth of work.
It was a process.
Yeah, we had a process. We are ice dyeing them, so you just set it up and let it wait and melt.
So this is something that we talked about, Jayme, but we didn't actually get some pictures. So here's the
rock.
So we made rocks for Dancing at Winasa. Again, about probably 8 years ago maybe. And we keep those in our storage, and we pull those out every now and then. They get repainted different colors all the time. But yeah, they come in handy to.
They do take up space because they're so oddly shaped. But they're sittable, so throw them in your lobby.
And again, so our flats are sitting right here, but all the rest of this space back behind here is just our black curtains, just so you wouldn't see through there.
Yeah, because the silk would have been too translucent because it's a very thin silk.
Right. So we're taking up space just with our black curtains. So back to Cabaret. And again, what I was saying before about some of the stock flats that are holding up some of these other larger flats. And Jayme's good at getting rid of flats once they get old enough and it's time to retire them.
Yeah, sometimes they just are not, like, even if they can and will stand up, sometimes they just shouldn't anymore because they've been used. Like sometimes they've got, 10 layers of paint or, more, and they get extra heavy then, and they get lots, like the surface is just really rough. And so it's hard to use them in like finer, nicer, smoother spaces. Then once they've reached a little bit of the end of their life, I like to find a use for them to be able to just say, you know what, we need to get rid of some and build some new ones through the next shows. So let's destroy these.
I'll say, I think nothing kills a flat faster than a red wall show, because red, you always have to paint it so many layers to get it to that red that you want, that then you're just building up weight and weight and weight, and the flats just start to fall apart after they get too heavy. So this is just the layout of, let's find our worst 4x10s. Okay, let's turn that into this one. What's our worst 2x10? Let's use that one for this one. What's our worst 3x12? And we'll just start kind of cutting them up like that. So send them off into retirement. I think, so I was saying about a plug, a door plug. So there's a door plug right there.
Mm-hmm. In this case, we did have to add a couple of, like, above that door plug was a custom piece built.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly. So that was a little 3x.
It's small, so you're not spending a ton of money on it. In this case, our money was going for Cabaret. A lot of it was to the platforms and all the brick, I think. I don't remember. We didn't have enough brick, I remember.
Some brick.
I don't remember where all our money went on this show.
Definitely not the proscenium, because the proscenium was reused too.
That
Yep,
was, yep,
right.
that's what I was just about to say. So we had to make a new base for it to get it to sit.
We did,
tilted.
yeah.
But other than that, that was built for
39 steps.
39 steps.
We did the bulbs differently. It actually didn't even get repainted. It was pretty good as is, honestly. And looked very different. Like, that's the challenge with reusing things, right? It's like the challenge for the designers is to come up with clever ways to reuse them, or like let enough time go by for reusing it in order to let the audience, if you've got a regular audience, not necessarily notice that it's a callback or a reuse, which is more likely with a specialty item like this, right? Like a proscenium, they're more likely to notice that than the flats or platforms.
A big thing to always remember, especially with a show like this one, when you're trying to save flats and stuff like that to keep in your stock, is always plan for extra time, because trying to separate the ones that you save versus the ones that you get rid of takes a lot more time than you would think.
Mm.
And just while I'm thinking about it, I mean, we haven't really talked about this, molding.
Oh,
So
yeah.
we reuse molding. We try to nail our molding on so that we can take it off at strike.
Yeah.
So small pieces like this, that will go in the trash. But long pieces, we'll hang on onto that as long as it doesn't disappear into our rack. Then we'll hang on to it. But we reuse lots of molding, doors.
We have a whole stock of doors that we reuse. Or I'm trying to diversify what style of doors we have. A lot of them are those 6-panel doors that pretty much everybody has. But I'm trying to slowly over time, I've been like, let's get one new door that's this different style, or let's make a flat panel, like no panel door, into a door with some different kind of panel design, so that it can have a little bit more life beyond just being what it is, and add variety to our stock.
And again, Jayme designs most of the shows with a 3-foot door in mind. So then that way we're reusing a lot of those same door flats and whatnot.
Yeah.
And
that's another situation where if you don't have a resident designer, like having that list of what size doors you have available for your designers to see and know will be helpful for them so that they're not choosing things that you're like, why are you using a 2'6" door when we have 10 3-foot doors?
And just while I'm thinking about it, the shelves too, that was a
Yeah, we did. The shells were also from 30 to 9 Steps.
And then this was Pride and Prejudice. So these flats, they were built theatrical style. You can see some of the light coming through, but that's actually the intent that we had behind it, was having these translucent flats. But because we wanted people to be behind them and be able to see through them, we did just minimal framing. So we knew that they weren't going to last very long. We knew they were going to fall apart. But we actually did get quite a bit of life out of them after that, because they then quickly turned into the flats for Hairspray.
Mm-hmm.
And in this image, you can see that they keep on going up and up and up. We just kind of painted them black up above where Jayme wanted to have the design, have the projection. So same with over here, you can see the edge a little bit right there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a good reuse of theatrical flats in a space that still had counterweight system at the time. And we're trying to keep it lightweight because there's not that many lighting positions. So, and those arbors actually couldn't hold that much weight. So it was good to have some theatrical flats for that space.
Yeah, that space is so tricky.
And there's a two-step platform step.
Yeah, there's several right there.
Oh, and here's a bar we'll talk about later too.
Oh yeah, there's another photo of it.
So then again, they got reused for a faculty rock band concert. And they got reused again for a dance concert. So as soon as they went over to Stewart, everyone was like, hey, we like those flats. Can we use them? And it was like, great. So they kept getting reused.
We also used them for masking for another show.
Oh, that's right. And Harvey, you're right. I forgot about that.
That's right.
We were running out of room, and so the fact that they were thin was partly what was useful for that.
So this is something that we don't do too often, is recycling a whole entire set.
Yeah.
You know, some people do it all the time, such as Christmas Carol.
Yeah, a lot of the holiday shows, they'll pull them out every year. In this case, it was like we do our series of summer shows, and we never have enough time for those shows. So we never actually intended to keep it. When we were building it for the first year, we used it. It was as we were using it that first year, we were sitting in the house going, you know what, this set would work really great for this show. And we're like, well, we could keep it because it is so minimal in terms of its physical presence. Like we could find space to make it work for like a year, or whatever. I mean, we ended up keeping it for longer than that, but the amount of room it took was much smaller than you would normally think to keep a whole set.
And again, because a lot of this is all stock and all stock platforms.
Yeah.
The only custom pieces were some of the triangular pieces here.
Yeah.
The fireplace, the windows, but again, those kind of broke down. We actually had the fireplace up in our lobby.
We kept it in the lobby for a while. People loved it.
Decorated it for the holidays and everything.
Yep, we had drapery on it and everything.
And the biggest problem was trying to find some place to store 24-foot long by 10-foot high beams.
Yeah,
that was difficult, but we eventually found a place.
Yeah.
So we were able to keep those safe. So here's another show shot in that same show. But then the following summer, we pulled it back out again.
Yeah, this was the show. You're like, you know what? This would be really great for Death Trap. We're like, well, yes, it would. So in this case, like the windows converted into display cases for all the weapons that are needed for Death Trap, and bookshelves, right? So we added books in there, and there were weapons, and we repainted the floor. We did paint, because this was a darker show, we did paint the beams and the rock walls down just a touch, like they got a glaze that made them a little less bright. But otherwise, yeah, the only thing that changed in this show is paint. I mean, and the furniture, of course.
And then, so during our summer, a lot of times we'll do rep shows. So this was not a rep show, it just happened right after Death Trap. But this was Nonsense, which typically is written for taking the place on the set of Grease.
Grease, I think, yeah.
But you can actually play it as if the nuns are playing on the set of anything. It's just whatever is in the building. So
right.
Changed it up a little bit.
It worked pretty well. Nice. I mean, that show just really wants a nice big open space. I mean, right? Like It just wants room for the nuns to be able to dance and move around and have things to sit on. And it worked well.
And then
oh yeah, we saved it one last time. So we saved it for that. We repeated it one summer. And honestly, that was like the next immediate summer. And I still had audience members not realize that we had reused it, which I thought was crazy. I thought for sure we would get criticism about it. But I was like, oh, it's so great. And they had no idea. Well, because I would mention it. It was like, because I was curious. And they, it's been a whole year for them. They're not going to remember, which I was shocked by, honestly. I'm sure some did. But so we were going to.
Then we put it away for 2 years.
And we were going to be using it here for our last show of this past spring for Vanya, Sonia, Masha, and Spike. And that's when everything went to hell. And this is as far as it got.
So
but
this was probably about March 15th or so.
Yeah, no, that would be like literally March 10th. I think I took that picture, which was like the day. This was the last day I was at the space for a very long time.
But we were also in the midst of planning our summer shows too. So
yeah, right. So I was like, okay, we cannot conceivably reuse this set again, like after this point. So it's got to go away. But then when we were working on the summer shows, it was like, well, we're doing Peter and the Starcatcher, and it started feeling like, well, what if the show took place in the attic? And I'm like, well, we have all these beams, so we were gonna reuse the beams and then get rid of everything else, with maybe the exception of the fireplace. We never really, this is as far as the design process got for that show for the summer. So who knows if the fireplace would have stayed or not. But yeah, the beams are going to get reused.
Kind of looks like you were designing 4x8 platforms.
Yeah, those were stock platforms. That's a nice thing. Like I do a lot of designing in SketchUp, and you can copy paste stuff. I have that list of how many platforms we have, our inventory, and then kind of like I did with that original model for 12th Night, 10 years ago. It's just I'm doing the same thing only in SketchUp now.
This is another example of reusing a set.
Yeah, again, it wasn't our intention when we built it, but afterwards, I was like, this was a huge, giant set that was a pain in the butt.
There's a lot of detail. There was a lot of
there was a lot of molding detail in it. I'm like, what if we were able to reuse it since it was so much work?
And again, this was the show. We already had another show, which was Jekyll and Hyde, coming up after this.
Mm-hmm.
So we were able to dismantle this and leave it in the wings during Jekyll and Hyde.
That's right. We did do it. A lot of it stayed in the wings.
Because Jekyll and Hyde was a little more compact, so it didn't stretch out into the wings, so we were able to do that. So
yeah, there wasn't a lot of stuff coming. Like there wasn't a lot of offstage storage needed for that show.
Right, exactly.
So it worked.
So we kind of saved this section and then the door section for the summer show, which again, summer shows are tough because
the time crunches.
So we're able to reuse this section and then move the door section over here, and then again, kind of cut the profile to change it up. So
we're using the same stock pieces. We either cut the pieces that we needed to cut, or we added new profile pieces on top of to get this cartoony. This was a fun cartoony like cross between Haunted Mansion and Scooby-Doo kind of vibe. So it's intentionally a little cartoony, which is fine. Worked really well. So yeah, I think we swapped the door over to the center. The rest of it might have been just stock flats. I don't know I think we only really kept that staircase and to stage left there on, and then the doorway and windows.
Right. Yeah, and unless we needed that went somewhere before, and then this time we needed a closet, so that was the only thing that we had to change out there.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing that we do, we try to just store pieces that we feel like we're gonna reuse a lot. And this was Philadelphia's story 7-8 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we built these columns, and they were just we built 6 for the show. We decided after the show that we'll just hang on to 4 of them. And we kind of reused them quite a bit. But here's those stars again, back in the back. And also another example of those 4x4 tiles that are down here that get reused quite a bit. So this was the first time that we built the column. And then probably a year later, maybe?
I think so.
We used them in Sunshine Boys.
It might have been that next summer, actually.
Was it?
I don't know. you know, they all blur together.
And again, this was a summer show. So we used 3 of them in here, and in the studio show, Lettuce and Lovage, I don't have a good picture of it.
No.
We used the 4th column to kind of end the wall that was used in there. This was Arcadia. So we used 1, 2, 3, 4 of them in that show.
Yeah, and then we mimicked them for the center wall.
Exactly. And again, this is another good example of molding.
Yeah.
We still got a ton of this molding, so we built it so we could take all of this molding back off and reuse it. I believe these are stock flats sitting up top here. This was Antigone, not quite Antigone.
Oh yeah.
Thebes.
Yes.
Thebes. Thank you.
Gosh.
So these are the bases of the columns here being reused. Here's some more of the rocks.
The rocks
in here. But this was a fun show where we went to our on-campus construction debris dumpster, and we found debris. So we needed this bombed-out building. So we're able to get lots of discarded conduit, electrical wire, ducting. We're very picky about what we chose. You know, we didn't want any of the nasty stuff, but we were able to get a lot of debris for a lot of dressing on that.
I think there was some fluorescent light fixtures and yeah, and we also put in some other interesting things, like we had some paintings and we had a chandelier down in there and other stuff from our storage.
So a lot of these were all stock flats, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, all of it.
Again, some of our stock platforms sitting on top of, or stock sitting on top of platforms.
And we borrowed this ladder. So I mean, this show was very cheap. I mean, it wasn't $500 cheap, but I think it was like $1,500 cheap, because we rented all the scaffolding. That was where all the money went. And I mean, the decoration in the back wall there, yeah, that's all. It was literally just there for like physical texture to catch the light. So we were just using cardboard.
Yeah, here's a fluorescent light kind of.
Yeah, it would flicker. It would flicker and stuff occasionally.
So here's those columns again. This was Born Yesterday.
Yeah.
Again, a summer show. So we reused the set again for the next show, but this again is 4x4 tiles.
Yeah.
All kind of laid out. I think these were some other tiles, like maybe 1 6x4 foot, and then again 4x4 triangles.
Yeah, I don't remember how the layout went, but it was all laid floor. I remember because it was marble. We like, I didn't want to be painting it all in the space. It would have been easier to paint the marble in the smaller sections than trying to do the whole floor. So that was part of that decision-making process too.
Again, you can kind of tell that a lot of this is all just stock flats that we have.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to design and being able to design in that way and having like clever ways of reusing things. So for, again, inventory for other outside designers is super handy. Like if they know they have those columns available. There was another slide earlier where I was like thinking about this. Oh, I know what I was thinking. It was like, and maybe this is overkill and I'm just coming up with this on the fly right now. But you know, if your designers know what the other shows in the season are looking like if they see those other designs and things, if you're keeping everybody in the loop, then there might be more of a chance for you to reuse stuff within a season rather than just next season. And I know a lot of places don't plan their seasons far enough in advance, but if you have enough information about what's coming next year, or the further you can think ahead and have designers assigned, the more ability you have to reuse things, because they'll be aware of what's available. Because oftentimes I'm just like, you know what, this whole section is great. Let's just keep this. That's like what happened with Something's Afoot. It's like, well, we need a giant staircase and second story for Something's Afoot. Let's not remake the wheel here. We have a huge chunk and I'll just use that. But I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't know it existed, right?
Right, exactly.
So anyway, tangent, sorry.
So this was side by side, which was...
Yeah, we reused it for yeah, I forget what these kind of musicals are called now. Jukebox musical, side by side. We did a little bit of dressing change for it too, if I recall. We got rid of a lot of stuff. And even though the Born Yesterday did not need a piano in its set at all, we designed the piano into its set so it would work for side by side, so that the two shows could work together.
And one of the things that we do during the summer is, because that show is coming on right on top of it, it's nice to be able for them to be able to rehearse on that.
Right.
Having a piano there in the space.
Yeah, and stage management can strike the furniture and set for the rehearsal at the end of the night for the next day.
I'm sure that other piano was right behind the curtain here. And
yep, it was, and we wheeled it right out.
Exactly. So again, we were talking about columns. The bases are out here, but when we took this picture, the columns were not actually standing. I think we're a little behind schedule on this one. Again, it was a massive build, so it was out. I'm sure by the time of show.
Yeah. So they were there for dressing outside the windows.
And then again, we've used those columns for just a lighting design class.
Yeah, class projects. Things for students to light.
These are just interesting looking. We also have these arches that we used for the class too, that we originally built for Chicago.
Yeah, we built this whole false proscenium for that show. That's where a lot of our time and effort went.
It did. It took some
It's
time.
mine. It was a lot of painting.
But I remember this being a lot of stock platforms.
Yeah, it's a lot of platforms.
On the show.
And flats, because of the hanging flats up above too.
Right. And then this was Around the World in 80 Days. So again, some dressing. We were able to use those that arch to kind of dress them up. And this is when we went looking for a spiral staircase, and we were able to find one that someone didn't want anymore. And
I know, it's crazy.
I think it was $50 for get it out of their way. They didn't want it. And we have reused this.
Crazy.
Reused it many times, a lot of times just for an escape.
Yeah,
So,
backstage for escape stairs, because there's never enough room backstage for escapes. So it's worked really handily for that a lot. But I do have to keep in mind the heights of platforms and things to make that work too, right? So again, that's where the importance of the information of having that staircase in your inventory and knowing the heights and all that stuff is really helpful.
And then this was Ragtime. This was our show in this past February.
Yes, our last show.
Our last show. But again, you can see the arch was reused here. And
this was a number of years later, like 5 years later?
I think even longer than that.
Yeah.
But because it actually went to another theater.
Yeah, another theater borrowed it and used it as well.
Borrowed it for a while, and then we got it back from them for Ragtime. You can see our spiral staircase is right there also.
We did have to alter that proscenium to make it fit this space.
Yep, exactly.
But it worked fine. It needed to be taller, right? So I had to just design into the space these platforms that it sat on top of, which I wanted to anyway, so it wasn't a hardship, but I needed to raise the proscenium to make it work, and it was too wide. Actually, the other theater it was built for is wider. So there's a plug piece in the center, yeah, right there, that came out, which is how it was built anyway, which worked great. And then we had to build a new center plug that was smaller for Ragtime. Yeah, and it was a little more decorative, which was nice anyway.
But then again, even these windows, so we were kind of thinking that these windows would be a one and done for Ragtime, but started thinking about the shows coming up for the summer again, summertime. And then this was blanking on the name, Jayme.
Holmes and Watson.
Holmes and Watson.
Going to be Holmes and Watson. Yeah, we were planning on, this was again one of the summer shows from this past summer that never happened. And yeah, I was initially not gonna keep them, but then as I was designing, I was like, well, hold on. They would work really well for this show. So
there's
columns back.
columns again. And again, brick and stuff.
I was gonna whitewash them here to keep it fairly easy. It's supposed to be sort of clinical, hospital-y feeling anyway. So, I mean, repainting brick is time consuming. So in this case, I was hoping to avoid some of that, how difficult it would be with doing a different kind of treatment to it instead.
Even sometimes we get stuff from other theaters to save money. Like
Yeah.
these.
Yep. So that's what I was going to point out up here. Thank you, Mike. Yep. So these pieces we actually got from their theater. They were getting rid of all these handrails.
They were getting rid of a bunch of handrails. So we had to make some new patches and things and whatnot to make it all work. But I mean, steel's expensive, so it was really helpful to have those bases to work from. And I just sort of designed it into them to decoratively to make all those adjustments. And it worked pretty well. So, but hey, free railing.
all that railing all around was
It was gonna go in the trash.
It was going in the trash. And so were a lot of these legs.
Oh yeah, that's right. The legs were also from that show.
I think most of the legs on here were from that show. And then we kind of matched some of the same designs.
Yeah.
With some of the stuff that we did.
The bigger legs, yep. And then the decorative pieces on there were also from that show. And I thought maybe I could use them in ragtime. Ended up not using them. But ultimately found a use for them here.
Right.
But oh well, it would have looked great.
Something else that we reused quite a bit, so we built a moon box for
it's a giant circle light box.
Into the Woods.
Yep, so that's what we originally built it for.
And then not too long after that, we used it for Inspecting Carol.
Yeah, I'd forgotten we hadn't even changed the surface of it for that.
Yeah. I mean, it worked great for that show. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, time is a big thing. Christmas Carol and Inspecting Carol is all about that show. So.
And then here it is in a badly cropped shot of Arabian Nights.
Yeah.
And then we reused it again for Duck Hunter, Shoots Angel.
So at that point, we actually updated the moon box because we realized like these light bulbs. And before it was soft covered here. So in this shot, it's soft covered with muslin, like a heavy muslin. Right. But in this case, it was partially painted for Into the Woods, so the bulbs did not show quite the same. But in Duck Hunter, it really did. And so that's when we decided to finally, after using it so much, replace it with a milk plexiglass.
Yep. It was changed after the show. Oh, and here's the stars again.
Oh yeah, the stars are back.
Stars.
And all of these tree shapes were made with old velours that we were getting rid of.
Yep.
We had gotten money to replace all of our decaying velours, so we used them in a show to make tree shapes out of. But yeah, we ultimately ended up replacing the bulbs with LEDs now in the moon box. So now it will last forever.
So here's that same moon again, just with a cutout sitting.
Yeah, we put a Luan cover over it and cut out the shapes to get and backed it with gel so that it would look like fluorescent or not fluorescent neon lights.
So that was
super versatile.
Beowulf.
Mm-hmm.
And then
this is Joseph.
Jayme used it for Joseph.
Yeah, I did a local production and was like, hey, I want to borrow our moon box.
And then this was Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. It was not lit up in this shot right here, but
light up the
moon palm that was right there.
Yep, and then we have
and here's a bar that's going to show up in some other shots. So we reused a lot of the same furniture over and over.
Yeah. Yep, I reused the palms as well for another show. And there's that bar again.
There's that bar again, the little shop.
That's where it first was built for.
Was that Murder on the Nile?
Yeah, it's Murder on the Nile.
Oh, and there's the round bar that we kind of.
Yeah, that the round bar was built originally for
Games of Foot. I got a picture.
Games of Foot. And so it's had a number of it's been in a number of shows now, including Hairspray and at the Corny Collins desk. And then it was in our Merry Wives of Windsor, the Real Housewives of Windsor. And it got lighting effects this time. It looked really good. But yeah, it was originally built for this show. This is a photograph where the set is not complete at all, but hey, it's got the bar in it.
It's got shape.
Yep.
But I think that's our last slide.
Yeah, so I mean, there's some furniture here in the slide too that gets reused a lot because it's really nice Art Deco furniture. We have a pretty good size storage space for our furniture, so we do pretty well on that front, but not everybody does. But we also will borrow furniture and other decorative bits from other places too. So that really helps fill out the spaces and things if you can't store it all yourself.
Yeah, we've used this set in many shows. I mean, it's just a good size. It's a good color.
Really heavy, but
it's really heavy, but it's sturdy. So
it's sturdy. So. Yeah, so we should, like, in terms of furniture and props and things, I'm like, I do a lot of shopping at thrift stores for furniture. It's harder to find this nice stuff there, but sometimes you'll be surprised. Habitat for Humanity is a really great resource for furniture. It can vary from habitat to habitat, depending on, because they're owned by different individuals and licensed through Habitat. So depending on which one you go to, the prices might be cheaper, better, or worse. Our local one here tends to be a little more expensive than I think it ought to be, but for what it is. But other places near you might be different. We get a lot of things from donations. If your subscribers, if you have subscribers, or if your parents, if you're a high school or whatever, know that you take donations of things, they will give you things. They will give you so much things to the point where it's like, okay, I cannot take your things. Because I mean, they start to think of you as the local Goodwill, essentially, right? Like some people who are like, maybe can't donate money, but would be very willing to donate things to you rather than to Goodwill or whatever, because they know they have more of a relationship with you as a theater. So donations are a really great source of, if you can get it out there in the world to your donors or your audience that you take donations. It does mean that you will get crap you don't need.
You will get $100 as somebody's personal papers of business, and
yes, you'll get a lot of
life
stuff, and some of it will go in the trash, and some of it you can donate yourself to Goodwill, which adds a little extra time and effort. But the gold you can mine out of that is worth the extra garbage you got to sift through a lot of the times. And we often will also like essentially rent things from thrift stores by buying a cheap $15 sofa or whatever, and then returning it back to this, and then return it back to the same store or donate it back to the same company or a different company, whatever. It just depends on what you need.
Yeah, and something that we have on campus is our own surplus. So anything that is NC State property cannot just be thrown away. So it all has to go surplus, and it's a great resource for a lot of things. There's a lot of furniture, a lot of unique items that go through there, and it used to be free for us.
States have state and federal surpluses that have all kinds of things that come through them.
That surplus is always priced to move.
Yeah,
they don't have storage for it either.
I do the same thing with furniture and props that I do with scenery, which is like, okay, I'm going to spend all my money on this really nice piece, this really nice new sofa, and cheap out on the rest to build up what we have that's really good, right? So I'm slowly kind of replacing a lot of our crappier, less useful stock furniture and things with really nice antique furniture and whatnot as time goes by, just because it just looks so much better and is more useful. But so I'm doing that same sort of stock management as I would with the scenery as well.
We have to pay for our storage. So our storage is limited. So we're only going to keep things that are worth something to us. If we can go out and find it at the thrift store easily, then we're not going to keep it in storage and pay the money to keep it.
Yeah, if that sofa, I can find that sofa at Goodwill or at Habitat because it's for a modern show, then I'm not going to pay to keep it in stock. I'm going to keep the good stuff and invest in the good stuff.
And then again, donations are huge. Donations are huge. They're great. We do love donations because we get some great things. So.
Oh, we should not be putting this on YouTube. We're going to be getting 1 million donations now.
Could
But
be
that's
good.
great. It'll be great. We need to be able to do some shows to need the donations. Yeah, that's about what we've got. Thanks so much for coming. Consider donating to University Theater.
All right. Thank you very much.